Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Monday. Welcome to a brand new week. We've got quite a bit to talk about here on Let's Talk Tropics this time around, as we've got some areas of disturbed weather over parts of the Atlantic Ocean. Nothing imminent right now, but it does appear that we'll probably see some development here coming up over the next several days. So a very warm and muggy one out here, a little bit different though than what we've seen over the past several days, with more of a partly cloudy sky across Acadiana. Temperatures are on the hot side too. We're already at 91 degrees with a dew point at 77 and a heat index holding right now at 105 degrees. Those skies will remain partly cloudy, but there have been a couple of isolated showers trying to get going. Not much there on the radar today, but I do believe we're going to see some better chances for an afternoon shower. Afternoon sea breeze will roll in, and then you're going to have a couple of outflow boundaries that will probably collide. So we're going to go ahead and keep those rain chances there in the 30% range as we go through the day today. So let's go ahead and start out with the Gulf of Mexico. And everything is pretty quiet out there. Got a little bit of Saharan dust that's out here in the middle part of the Gulf of Mexico, and that extends out here out into the Caribbean Sea as well. As far as the winds, everything pretty light out there for our friends that might be doing some boating out there, or those that are working out in the offshore waters today. Most of you in the nearshore waters are probably seeing 1 to 2 foot seas, maybe 2 to 4 as you get beyond 60 nautical miles from the coast. Then it gets a little bit rougher a little bit farther to the south there over the Bay of Campeche. But all in all, a very quiet day across much of the Gulf of Mexico. Central America, we've got a bit of an upper low that's kind of spinning here over Jamaica right now. Not really bringing any inclement weather across parts of Central America. Looks like a pretty day there in Guatemala, into El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, then back toward Costa Rica and Panama. We have a few showers and thunderstorms there, but really nothing much to talk about there over the western part of the Caribbean and into Central America. And you can kind of see the rest of that upper trough that's right about in here over Cuba and then kind of drifting off toward the west. Some showers and thunderstorms over Venezuela as well as Colombia. And then the tropical disturbance that we're talking about is still out here in the Atlantic Ocean, and that is going to be moving off to the west. Actually, just calling it a tropical wave still. It isn't even official disturbance as of yet, but the area that we are going to be watching here is going to be out here in the Atlantic Ocean. And eventually that moisture is going to be tracking its way, we think, back off toward the northwest, toward the Bahamas. And then whether or not it goes into the Atlantic or whether or not it goes into the Gulf of Mexico, that is still yet to be seen. But you can also see that there's not nearly as much Saharan dust out here in the middle part of the Atlantic as what we have seen over the past several weeks. Still some Saharan dust out there, but pretty negligible compared to what we've seen over the past couple of weeks. So real quick, we'll just show you what the National Hurricane Center is saying. With this particular disturbance, they're saying no development for the next 2 days, but then going into days 3 through 7, we've got a little bit better chance for development here in that area, anywhere from Puerto Rico over toward the southern tip of Florida. Now, will it develop here, or it could possibly develop here, or maybe even the initial development could be out here? We just don't quite know yet, and we won't know more until this develops into an active tropical disturbance before the models are really going to grab on and see what we've got going on out there. So let's just go ahead real quick and I'm going to take a little bit of a model tour, but we're going to just stick with a week from today, so next Monday. And this right here is the Euro model. And we can see there's a decent amount of moisture over parts of South Florida into the Bahamas and even in the southeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, but no tropical low pressure area. And I will tell you, we're going to look at the extended model. Even though you don't see anything here, the GFS model does develop something in the Gulf of Mexico farther down the road. It's considerably slower than the other models. Now, the Euro model Actually, this one coming out very, very early this morning, indicating more of a tropical type of system here off the east coast. And the initial round of this kind of moves it off toward the west-northwest and turns it more like that, kind of riding it there along the eastern seaboard. But remember, the Euro model produces a 10-day forecast every other model runs. So this is actually coming from very, very early this morning. So let's go ahead and move to the Canadian model. And the Canadian model isn't showing a lot here, more, kind of a broad area of low pressure here. But I will say that in the latter versions, or the farther down the road going into August 6th and 7th, it does have a low kind of develop and move up and then becomes more of a tropical system in this particular area a little bit farther down the road. And the Icon model does have a low pressure area right off the Florida coast, but I'll tell you, this one tracks it off in this direction and then pulls it back off toward the northeast. So at least for right now, 3 of the 4 models are keeping this low pressure area farther toward the east. And the GFS model, will just take this out into La La Land real quick. Again, you can see the moisture right about in here, but then notice what happens in the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico right there. Very, very slowly, you start to see a low pressure area developing there near the New Orleans area and then kind of pushing in. But that's at the very end of this model run, going into August 9th or 10th. And the Euro model, as we kind of showed you earlier, does have a low pressure area off the east coast. The moisture is right about there now. And then getting into August the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you'll start to see that low develop there along the Bahamas and then kind of turn along the east coast, maybe impacting parts of the Carolinas. So that's what we're looking at when it comes to the extended version of some of these models. But remember, most of the models here are showing some kind of a low pressure area anywhere from the Carolinas all the way down to the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. The GFS going with Louisiana, and then other ones going out here. So we've got a pretty broad area where we could see the possibility of some development and eventually a future track. So I'll tell you right now, the models are out to lunch at this point. So anywhere from Louisiana to the East Coast is going to be a strike zone if indeed this does develop. Remember, we still have to wait for it to develop in the first place. But I will tell you that the shear map is starting to show signs of a lot of weakening. We don't have a lot of shear right now in the Gulf. Development zone out here where that tropical wave is pretty limited when it comes to wind shear as well. And the overall picture of the Atlantic Basin has considerably less wind shear than what we saw last week, and way less wind shear than we saw just about 2 weeks ago. And the same goes with the Saharan dust, even though there's still a considerable amount of dry air and Saharan dust. And in fact, that tropical wave right here is battling a lot of dry air and Saharan dust all around, and it also has some Saharan dust in its path as well. So again, before you start jumping into conclusions on how strong this is going to be or where its eventual landfall would be, we have to actually see if it's going to make it through all of this mess here in the first place, because there still is a chance that this will not even develop at all. The National Hurricane Center, remember, is going with a 50-50 bet that it will develop over the next 7 days. So that's basically saying it might or it might not. Water temperatures, though, on the other hand, are way warm enough to be able to sustain any kind of a tropical system as long as the atmospheric conditions are good enough. But it looks like here, anything that is shaded in yellow, orange, red, or pink, that is high enough to sustain a tropical system. These numbers here are in Celsius. So 26.5 to 27 degrees Celsius is right about that 80-degree line. So you can see the Gulf, the Caribbean, the Western Atlantic, Eastern Caribbean, and the development zone over the Central and Eastern Atlantic is generally open for business. And when it comes to the warm waters, and on top of that, how deep those warm waters go, that's called the tropical cyclone heat potential. Eastern part of the Gulf, all of the Caribbean pretty much, all the way out to the Leeward and Windward Islands that are right there, and your development zone that goes farther out into the Atlantic, we are basically going off the charts there when it comes to the tropical cyclone heat potential. And what you can think of this is not just the waters that are 80 degrees at the top of the surface, but how far down below the surface those 80-degree water go. So you're talking about the difference between regular fuel and premium fuel. And when you have these kind of setups, any kind of a tropical system that might want to be developing and moves in this area would have that premium fuel, and occasionally you would get not just quick development, but perhaps rapid development to go along with it. So there are a lot of things that are in its favor, but there are a few things that are not in its favor. So just a real quick review. There's a look at the GFS, which was kind of had a broad area of low pressure a week from today over South Florida, while the Euro has an actual tropical system curving away from Florida and then heading toward the Carolinas. The Canadian, as well as the Icon, has low pressure over Florida, but it is a little bit slower than the Euro, having some development as it moves across Florida and then gets pulled around that big ridge of high pressure that's out here over the Atlantic Ocean, and you're going to see more of a turn like that. So that would be the case with the Euro, or rather the Icon, as well as the Canadian model. So we're going to look at all of them over the next couple of days, and again, this is always the best time to do some preparations. I know I've shown you this graphic a million times if you're a regular here on Let's Talk Tropics. And I did ask on Friday, there's 15 different things that are on this particular list. Kind of asked folks to just grab 5 of those, since anything that would possibly develop could be here within a week to 10 days. So these are the things that you can grab right now while there's still plenty of those things that are out there, and you don't have to fight the crowds to get them because we're not in any kind of an emergency right now. But remember, as we go into August, these are the areas, this is about where that tropical wave is, and you can see that generally most of the tracks that go across the Atlantic Basin during the month of August end up in that particular area, and you still get a pretty high area here in these regions too. These are basically all of the storms, the named storms, going all the way back to 1944, where their tracks have moved. So you get quite a few of them in the Gulf, you get a lot in the Western Atlantic, but several of them do develop and move toward the northern Leeward Islands and going into Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and into the Bahamas as well. And as we know, the peak of the hurricane season is September the 10th. We are coming out of July. July is normally a fairly quiet month. It started out with a bang, but really kind of fell apart with all that Saharan dust and dry air. But as we look at a normal year, you can see the beginning of August things start to tick up, and by the middle part of August, they really ramp up, and by the time you reach the early part of September, that is the peak of the hurricane season, and that's when the bulk of our tropical systems actually form and continue to move across the Gulf of Mexico. And I do look at this line right here in the beginning of August. Somebody made the mention on social media the other day, oh, here we go, just in time for school to start. And I replied, well, are you surprised? Because I seem to remember as my kids were growing up that we would start school for a week and then would be out for a couple of days because a tropical storm or a hurricane was threatening, which is why I've always been a big advocate of let's start school after Labor Day. That way we have a full month of hurricane season that we don't have to worry about during the month of August. I'm sure some of the teachers and the students would probably agree with me as well, but then they wouldn't like me too much when they're still going to school after Labor Day during the month of June. So that's just a little my take on it. I would love to see no school during August, because then we wouldn't have to worry about any tropical storms or hurricanes during the month of August. But it does start to ramp up as we head into August and September. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do, please click this like button and also subscribe to the channel. And turn on the notifications too. I really enjoy hanging out with everybody at lunchtime each and every weekday afternoon. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow with more on Let's Talk Tropics. I'll update you on social media if anything changes over the next day or two. And also don't forget Acadiana Weather Today, a morning weather forecast where we kind of just chat about the upcoming weather conditions and how they're going to affect your day. That drops at about 7:30, and then Let's Talk Tropics happens live every weekday at noon. And if you want to go to my channel, you can also find some fun videos that are there as well. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Hope you have a great afternoon. Try to stay cool. You're a little not quite used to this hot weather anymore with all the clouds and the rain we had for the past couple of days. So those heat index values getting up to about 108 later this afternoon. Take it easy if you have to work outside. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Have a great day.